I would like to introduce our panelists to you. First, there's Joan Camagong. Joan represents clients against product liability, consumer protection, and warranty claims in individual, class action, and mass action context. She defends clients in both federal and state courts, as well as in MDLs and state court coordinated proceedings. Joan has also litigated breach of contract, trade secret, and antitrust disputes. Her experience includes claim negotiations and initial case evaluations, risk assessments, managing discovery and related motion practice, coordinating fact investigation, drafting and arguing dispositive motions, taking and defending depositions, corporate and expert witness development, pretrial motion practice, settlement negotiations, and trial. She is also a member of the Eastern District of California's pro bono panel, in which she has represented clients alleging 8th Amendment violations under 28 USC section 1983. She's an associate with the firm Shook, Hardy & Bacon, LLP. I am also pleased to have with us Laurie Rose Lubiano. Laurie is the IP and Product Counsel of the Climate Corporation. With a focus in intellectual property and registered patent attorney, Laurie has counseled high-tech clients, including independent inventors, startups, and public companies, and has supported all levels of management. As IP and Product Counsel for the Climate Corporation, Laurie is responsible for developing the IP assets for the world's leading digital agricultural company that provides digital tools for the world's farmers. As lead counsel for global product and engineering team, Laurie also covers licensing, open source, international expansion, contract negotiation, data security, privacy compliance, and employment law. Last year, Laurie was recognized with the Best Under 40 Award and In-House Counsel Diversity Leadership Award from the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, also known as NAPABA, and the Unity Award from the Minority Bar Coalition and FBANC. Outside of work, Laurie is committed to serving the community. Governor Gavin Newsom recently appointed Laurie to serve on the Medical Board of California, which protects consumers through the licensing and regulation of physicians and other health professionals. Laurie also holds various leadership roles with FBANC, the San Francisco La Raza Lawyers Association, Asian American Bar Association of the Greater Bay Area, and Hispanic National Bar Association and the National Filipino Lawyers Association. Laurie graduated from the University of Pacific McGeorge Law School and earned a BA in the molecular and cell biology from UC Berkeley. Prior to practicing law, Laurie worked as a criminalist intern for the San Francisco Public Department Crime Laboratory. We're thrilled to have you. Next, we have Marc Pilotin. He is the general counsel with the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. Marc is also the immediate past president of FBANC. Currently, Marc serves as general counsel for the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, the LWDA. The LWDA enforces California's workplace laws, combats wage theft, ensures health and safety on the job, connects Californians to quality jobs and career pathways, and administers unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, and paid family leave. LWDA oversees 7 major departments, boards, and panels that serve California workers and businesses by improving access to training, promoting high-road jobs, eliminating barriers to employment, and creating a level playing field for employers. He was appointed by General Counsel by Gavin Newsom in July 2019. Prior to joining the LWDA, Marc was the counsel for wage and hour litigation for the U.S. Department of Labor's Western region and was an associate at Leaf, Cabraser, Hyman, and Bernstein. Before law school, he was a 4th grade teacher in South Los Angeles. Marc has been a lecturer at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law and has presented on various topics, including wage and hour for the American Bar Association. He has also served as court-appointed counsel in civil rights cases. In the community, he is the immediate past president of FBANC and has served as chair of the Oakland Public Ethics Commission as a director of the ACLU of Northern California. Marc graduated from Berkeley in 2009 and received his master's and bachelor's degrees from UCLA. Maria Segarra is with us, and we're happy to have her. She is the immediate past mentorship co-director So all this programming that you have today is in no small part due to Maria's great efforts this past year. Maria Segarra's advocacy is grounded in empowerment. She strives to create a space where her clients are seen and heard, and where they are an equal partner in their immigration process. Maria currently works at Jubilee Immigration Advocates, where she represents individuals applying for status through family petitions or as survivors of violent crimes or domestic violence. Prior to Jubilee, Maria worked at Tahiri Justice Center, where she helped immigrant women and children fleeing violence. Her past work included defending tenants facing eviction, assisting petitioners seeking restraining orders for their protection, and representing survivors of trafficking and sexual assault in their application for immigration relief. In her personal time, Maria fills her cup by spending time with loved ones and voraciously consuming fantasy novels. I'm also pleased to have with us Vanessa Candelaria. Vanessa is the principal attorney and founder of law offices of Vanessa Candelaria Professional Corporation. Through her legal career, Vanessa has practiced exclusively in the area of family law. With her legal training and knowledge, she provides compassion and advocacy for her clients. Vanessa's experience working on a broad spectrum of family law matters include divorce, pre-divorce counseling and planning, premarital agreements, complex marital property issues, high conflict child custody disputes, child and spousal support issues, and domestic violence prevention and defense. Vanessa protects her clients' assets and the best interests of her clients and their children. She represents clients in public court and before private judicial officers. In addition, she serves as a consulting attorney for clients who are preparing for a divorce, going through the divorce process, are in mediation, and who are seeking a second opinion on his or her family law matter. Prior to earning her Juris Doctorate degree from Golden Gate University School of Law, Vanessa earned dual degrees in English and psychology and social behavior, and a minor in political science from the University of California at Irvine. While at the University of California, Irvine, Vanessa was the first recipient of the Most Inspirational Student Scholarship Award. At Golden Gate University School of Law, Vanessa was accepted into the honors lawyering program, and she was a judicial extern at the San Francisco Unified Family Court. And we are also joined by Idrian Mollaneda, who will be serving as the moderator to ask the panelists questions and direct the discussion. He is a 3L at Berkeley School of Law, and we are thrilled that he is here with us today. So with no further ado, Adrian, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate it. So the first 5 minutes of my script here was going to be introductions, but you already did it, so we're good. We've got that out of the way. So I'm just going to jump straight into the first question. And I don't know, how shall we do this? Should I like call on people? Should we just wait for people to speak up? How do we want to do it? I'll call on people. How about that? Okay, just so we have some structure. So the first question gets at, what was the state of the economy like when you personally graduated from law school? And if you graduated during the last recession, which I understand most, if not all of you did, how did that affect your job search? What was the job market like? So maybe let's start with Laurie.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for having me. That time, this was early 2018, I'm sorry, 2008. And the market, this was the downturn of the housing market, and it really was slim pickings, I think, from my perspective. I think back then there weren't as many online resources or websites to do job searching. There were a few major ones, but from my perspective, it was, looking at different law firms' websites or just hearing through my network of what was available. So it was pretty tough.
Thanks, Laurie. Let's go with Maria then next.
Thanks, Adrian. So I graduated in 2010, and it was still in the economic downturn at that moment. when I was as well, actually in my third year, I noticed that individuals who are graduating or who have graduated recently have seen job offers being rescinded, and also have seen being deferrals where if they've received offers from big firms, they're being deferred the offers. So that's what I've seen. And also on a personal level, I went through the OCI process, got a couple of callbacks, never got an offer.
I see. Joan, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. So I graduated in 2012. I wouldn't say we were in a recession, but the job market definitely wasn't hot. The firms and companies and the government seemed to be present and hiring, but they weren't hiring at the levels that they were sort of pre-recession. And so in terms of job search, I did OCI. I did I sort of looked up every single firm's website and sort of went that route.
Great. Let's go with Vanessa next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me as well. I graduated in 2008 at the very start of the recession, and it was a scary time, especially when you're considering all the law school debt that you have and all of your wishes and dreams and becoming an attorney and not a lot of job prospects. So it was definitely scary times, and a lot of firms that had offered associate positions were rescinding those offers. And a lot of law students who graduated were working for free at the time. So I remember that being a pretty scary time.
Great. Last but not least, Marc, and your very special guest.
Hi, and thanks again for having me too. So I graduated in 2009, and I had an offer to go to a firm after my 3L year, and they told me not to show up until, a couple months down the line. So I was among the many who were deferred. In terms of, I ended up being lucky toward the end of my 3L year getting a judicial clerkship. So I did clerk for about 2 years. But in 2011, when I was looking for a new job again, it was, it was difficult, and it was one of those things where you just had to be in touch with the people around you, be in touch with your career development office, and kind of just make those connections and hustle. I will say that, like everyone was talking about here, everyone, a lot of folks were affected by the recession, but 10 years on, it didn't take 10 years, but everyone ended up being fine. I know it doesn't feel like that right now, but everyone ends up being okay.
So that's great. Thank you so much, everybody, for your insights. So given your answers, I actually wanted to go a little bit off script here. My next question was going to be about like how the economy in general affects like your practice areas, but I given that like the economy and the state of the legal market wasn't super great when you graduated, maybe talk a little bit about your journey as you were like finding your job and how you got to where you are now. And then maybe if you have time, you can talk about how the state of the economy has affected your particular practice. And maybe this time let's go with Vanessa first.
Oh, that is a loaded question. So I think I was unique when I graduated law school because I was a single mother of 2 young kids. They were 4 and 5 at the time. And as I mentioned earlier, without having prospects of jobs on the horizon, it was challenging for me. So I was told early on in my law career that it's all about who you know. And so what I did in between taking the bar exam and waiting for bar results is I had about 80 informational interviews. I kind of treated it like a full-time job. And the beauty of me doing 80 informational interviews before I actually started practicing as a family lawyer is that I got to know my future colleagues really well. a lot of them met me when I was doing interviews with them. Unfortunately, it didn't end. I didn't end up getting my first job through any of these informational interviews. It was actually through a Craigslist ad, but it certainly helped me, and I have no regrets that I did that. With everything happening on Zoom now, I find that informational interviews might be a little bit easier. I've been doing them myself with law students and younger attorneys, and instead of going out of your way to go meet someone for a cup of coffee or lunch, it's really nice to just open up your laptop and have a Zoom meeting. So.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. How about let's move to Laurie.
Yes, I definitely echo what Vanessa said about it. Knowing people can definitely help you, get your resume to the top of the stack. And so when I had graduated, well, let me go back and say I've been doing informational interviews since I got out of college, just for fun on the side to also meet people. And so when I graduated from law school, I had a former colleague that I had worked with before law school who always said, come and talk to me when you graduate. And so I remembered that, and I went back to him to just catch up, see how he was doing. And at the time, he was doing some consulting work at a law firm. That was my way into a law firm at the time. So I think it can be very valuable. And as Vanessa said, I think now, some people who are typically busy that have full calendars, they might have a little more time, because they don't have to travel. And those are definitely resources for everyone.
Great. Joan, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I did the whole 2L OCI route, and I got a number of callbacks, so I was very optimistic, and I thought, oh, I might land one, but that did not happen. So after the OCI, I resorted to, actually, I didn't resort to, I was doing a number of informational interviews as a 1L, just to try and get an understanding of what I might want to do. So I tapped into that network, and I just wanted people to know that I was still looking and I was still interested. I took people out to coffee. I know they can't do that now, but like Vanessa said, it's probably much easier and much more convenient to do a Zoom call with somebody for 5 to 10 minutes just to connect. And I ended up getting my first job through a referral. A friend of a friend of a friend essentially sent around a job for a firm in San Diego. So I actually started off doing plaintiff's work for a small firm in San Diego for my first 2 years. Before transitioning over to defense practice at a bigger firm. So it really was just, and I ended up getting, or I was helped along the way into a big law through connections as well. So it's really important to just talk to people.
Excellent, thank you. Marc, with your swapped out guest, could you go next?
Sure, absolutely. So I can't stress enough what everyone has already said about the informational interviews and using the resources that you have. I know we find ourselves in an interesting time right now, but events like this and kind of connecting through organizations like FBANC are probably a wonderful way to go. I can't stress enough how, and I think this is true of all of us here, how much lawyers love talking about their work and what they do, and especially in FBANC, kind of those organizations that are trying to figure, folks in the organization who want to help out, who want to, grow our community, and who, want to uplift those who want to be part of the legal profession. So, ever since I was in law school, I always thought, networking was kind of a, not a dirty word, but an interesting kind of thing that I was definitely not used to. But what I would say is that, using organizations like FBANC and making those connections with the mentorship director like Will to make those connections is probably a really great way to do it right now during the pandemic. So.
Thank you, Marc. Last but not least, Maria.
Thanks, Adrian. So I have a rather different approach. For some of you may already know me, you know that I'm an introvert and that I'm on the awkward side of the spectrum. Mark is vehemently shaking his head. But what this meant was that it was particularly difficult for me after having gone through the OCI process and realizing that I would never get an offer, a job prospect through that process. I internalized that to mean that I was not good enough. And the reason I'm talking about this now, and I'm choosing to talk about this, despite this being, videotaped and recorded, is that it's really important that we are careful about what we assume about ourselves and who we are, what we're worth, and our identity. And it's one thing to say I didn't go through I didn't get an offer through the OCI process, but it's another thing to think altogether that, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes to, succeed as an attorney, because those are two different thought processes and yet powerful nonetheless. And I was fortunate in law school to have so many mentors, Marc included, and a whole slew of others who was there and challenged this perception of mine. And they got me to the point, they through their through conversations with them, it was vulnerable, it was hard, it was difficult. And they helped me realize that the reason I didn't get an OCI offer is that it's not where I want to go. It's not what the type of lawyer I want to be. I had a different trajectory. I just was a little too stubborn to have the courage to pursue it, because it was really scary to think, I grew up poor, and my dad is doorman, my mom worked at Target at that time, and to consider nonprofit legal work with all the loans that I had then was a very scary prospect. And yet it was the one that seemed true to who I am and what my values are then and now. And so I guess my challenge to you all is that it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to it is a difficult time. It is unprecedented, but you have all these people in front of you. We have different ways of getting to where we are, and we all made it okay. And so my hope is that you will have the courage to reach out. I know it's very scary, but in order to prepare for this call, I remember thinking about all the moments where in the last 10 years where I feel like I had to start all over again. And Vanessa, you remember this because I reached out to you. And Marc, you remember this because I reached out to you. So these are the people that even as a seasoned attorney at that time, I felt like I had to go back to square one and reach out because I need to redefine my career path and my career trajectory. So I want to reiterate this. It's okay to be afraid. And it's an opportunity to build your courage and your strength and your resilience.
Thanks so much for those wise words, Maria. And I think that's, I'd like to pivot at this point to your practice areas, like describe your current law practice. And also, I think something that's also on the minds of a lot of the law students right now is like, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your work? For better or for worse. Guess you could be honest with us. So I want to let's start with you, Marc.
Sorry, I was trying to look for the mute. So I work for the state government, and we, as I think Joan kind of alluded to too, the government is still hiring. The pandemic has resulted in a lot of needs at the state level in terms of enforcement and kind of the delivering of services for our workforce here in California. So in terms of where we are in the pandemic, yes, as folks may have heard, there has been a pay cut to state workers, but we are definitely still hiring across the board in terms of, for lawyer positions, because there is a need to enforce, our workforce safety laws, our wage and hour laws here in California. It's all become all the more important, especially in light of the pandemic and the need to make our workplaces safer. So
Thanks, Mark. Vanessa, would you like to chime in?
So right now, family law is fortunately or unfortunately booming. I think what the pandemic did is it has forced people to live in tight quarters, and it's also caused people to, decide, hey, if the world's going to end, I don't know if I want to be with this person anymore. So family law, there's a lot of divorces right now. And sadly, along with that, there is a lot of domestic violence, and people are very stressed out. And so we've been getting definitely a lot more cases concerning domestic violence. And so for family law, I own my own firm, as you know, and I have a lot of colleagues that are also hiring. Some of them have not necessarily made it and have laid off folks. Because family law tends to be a much more smaller practice area with usually less than 10 attorneys in any given law firm. But I would say that fortunately, I'm very grateful my firm is doing well. We're hiring, we just hired another attorney in paralegal. So if you're looking for like a niche practice area and you have the emotional wherewithal to deal with something like family law, you may consider doing that.
Excellent, thank you. Maria, would you like to describe your current law practice and how COVID-19 has affected it?
Yes. So as a nonprofit immigration advocate, there is always more demand for our services than our capacity to meet these services. What we've noticed recently in the last few months is that the number of our API callers, immigrant callers, have dropped, and the number of our Spanish-speaking callers have gotten back to similar pre-COVID levels. So I'm interpreting this to mean on some level that some immigrants are choosing to defer pursuing their immigration options. Or I'm also, another interpretation of mine is that they're trying to focus on more immediate needs: food, housing, security, things like that. For a lot of immigrants, particularly those who are undocumented, it's a double whammy in the sense that if they have lost their jobs or they have been furloughed, they are not eligible for unemployment benefits. And so it's particularly challenging, and it breaks my heart. And it makes me wish I'm a millionaire so I can give money to them.
Oh, thank you for sharing, Maria. Laurie, would you like to describe your current law practice and how COVID has affected it?
Yes. So I'm IP and product counsel for the Climate Corporation. So my day-to-day responsibilities revolve around managing a patent portfolio, a global patent portfolio of over 500. And so I think that in one sense it's insulated from the economy because patents and inventing, it has to keep going. So, if you look at some big companies, they routinely spend, I think they say 12% of their revenues in R&D. So that process is going to keep going. So, and that's one reason why I picked to be a patent attorney, because I saw even before as a law student how there was some stability in that area. I also work with product and engineering teams to help with our product development and launch and all the issues that, for example, we may need to have strategic partnerships with other companies, or there's certain vendors we need to bring on to develop our products. So I'll help with the contract negotiations with that. I think an interesting statistic I saw the other day was for IP attorneys in the US, Asians, and not just, that doesn't specify Filipinos, make up only 5.6% is what I thought I remember seeing. And that was the highest percentage of the minorities there. So Blacks and Latinos were even less than that. And so in patent nationwide that are Filipino, I can count them with my two hands that I've met over the years. So, you know, it's good that there's some job stability there. But it is also like Vanessa's practice, it is also a niche area.
And finally, Joan. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.
So the immediate impact for me in March was just an immediate slowdown, given that a portion of my practice involves trial work. So when the court shut down, the trial dates were continued, a lot of that work had to be put on the back burner, primarily also because it was such an uncertain time. And so a part of the reasoning there was to deliver cost savings to our clients. Around April and May, things began to shift. We started to see sort of more litigation related to the pandemic, more risk assessment work, more regulatory sort of advising that our clients needed. And so there began to be an uptick in that in that type of work. And so that's sort of primarily where I was busy. But more recently, this past month, including this month, there's been an uptick in sort of litigation that we normally do. And so that just gives me a sense of sort of cautious optimism for where we're going to end up, because once everything begins to open back up and once the courts are fully operational, I get the sense that at least for myself and colleagues at other firms have said this as well, that we're going to be in almost an all hands on deck type of mode, just given the influx of the new work related to the pandemic, and coupled with the work that was put on the back burner that we now have to pick up again. So, for that reason, I just want, folks to know that there's reason to be optimistic. And I think that if you just sort of stick with it, it'll be okay. Everyone will get a job and it'll all work out.
Thank you, Joan. Yeah, it seems that at least personally, my general observation of how COVID has been affecting the legal profession, it seems that people are learning to adapt as we do, right? And it seems like it's potentially not going to be as bad as we might have initially thought. And so given that there's still a lot of uncertainty, especially for like the newer grads with like the bar being postponed and potentially and being online, and there's still being a push to just give diploma privilege and all of that. And so with all of that in mind, I wanted to ask for like, what is some advice that you would give to especially like the 2Ls and 3Ls who are, looking to graduate soon in the next 2 years with like navigating the job market, especially if they haven't quite secured a job yet. What's some advice that you can offer to our law students here? Oh my gosh, I forgot to call someone. Let's go with Vanessa.
For me, I think my advice is all about mindset. And I want to piggyback off of what Maria said earlier. And Maria, thank you very much for being vulnerable and sharing that with everyone. I think you're amazing. And I think it's very important to be kind to yourself because we can be our own worst enemies sometimes. And we all went to law school because we all want to be the best lawyer version of yourself that you want to be. So my advice is, be kind to yourself, be focused. I did not go to law school necessarily wanting to go and be a family law attorney. I had an idea in my head, but I did all kinds of different opportunity. I took advantage of different opportunities, from working at the DA's office to being an immigration law clerk, to doing a small stint in IP. Luckily for me, those experiences all led me back to family law. It's just something I'm really passionate about and something I feel like I can add value to. And so, use this opportunity now to kind of figure out what you want to do, because you're going to be okay, like Maria said. So when you graduate and when you pass the bar, I think it's important that you're already focused and you know what you want to do. And I think it'll make the job seeking less difficult and less challenging. And remember to be kind to yourself.
Thank you for those excellent words. Maria, why don't you go next?
I had a suspicion that you would call me next. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for all of that. You have been one of the kindest and most compassionate people I know. So I just want to say that out loud. My suggestion is threefold. One is piggybacking on what Vanessa said, get experience on what your true interests are. I think I don't know about you, but when I went to law school, I wrote in my personal statement that I wanted to be an attorney for kids. And that was true then. I'm not sure how true it was after graduation, and 10 years after law school, it's no longer true. So figure out who you are now, what your interests are, and what your strengths are. So that's one. And one way to, at least for me, what I've done is I've tried to intern at all of the child advocacy places that I could. Realized that I didn't like impact litigation work, that I really liked direct services. So that helped narrow it down. My second suggestion is have a closer look of your strengths and areas of growth. And this is a hard one, right? Because it goes back to that place. It brings us back to that place where we're like, okay, are you telling me to look at myself again and think of myself from a, cup half empty kind of perspective? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is distinguish who you are and what you can do, or what your strengths and weaknesses are at the moment. Start with the perspective that you're good enough right here, right now. Believe in that. And once we are secure in that belief, then we can move forward and have a closer look at, okay, what are the skills? What are the areas where I already am strong in? And what are the areas where I need to work on? So for me, 10 years after having practiced law for 10 years, I'm still not good at networking. It still scares me, and it's making me uncomfortable. And I know that it's because I don't put myself out there enough. So it's okay to think about what areas of growth you want to focus on, because the thing that we have more of this year, and hope maybe next, is more time, hopefully. And use that time wisely. Because time, it's not a non-renewable, it's a non-renewable resource, right? We can choose to watch 3 hours of Netflix. That's cool, that's okay, I've done that. Or we can choose to be a little more intentional, a little bit more focused on how can we grow and how can we invest in our future. And the third is really, it's a balancing act. Like I'd like to think of it, and I was intentional in writing in my bio, filling our cup, because I feel like there's this tendency among lawyers or lawyers in training to really push ourselves to our limit and then go another 5 miles or 10 miles. But that's a recipe for burnout, right? So it's figuring out early on what our balance is, and like, what are your non-negotiables? So those of you who have loans, like, what's the minimum amount that you need in order to survive? And that's a hard thing to take a closer look at, right? But it's necessary. And there are people within FBANC and outside of FBANC that you can have a more candid conversation about this on a one-on-one level. So take a closer look.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate you saying all of that. One thing that I'd like to actually plug really quickly before we move on, there is, like, if anyone who has any questions to ask of our panelists can do so. You can either put it into the chat or the Q&A function. We'll see both. And they will be answered at the end. So feel free to submit questions at any point. So I'm going to move on now to Joan. And so Joan, if you have any advice that you'd like to dispense to our law students here, especially those if they're looking for a job potentially.
It's hard to come after all this great advice, but I mean, I agree with all of it completely. And I just think for me, the biggest thing that sort of rang true was sort of, and that's helped me along my path, is just keeping an open mind. You know, it's always good to have a plan and to understand what you want, but don't be scared to deviate from that if there's an opportunity that you know you're not sure about, but could give you sort of the skill set that you need to sort of reach your plan. So, and for me, that was, you know, taking a shot at a smaller firm in Southern California, doing a practice that has absolutely nothing to do with the practice I have now, but it had everything to do with building sort of my initial skill set as a lawyer. It was scary, but it was an opportunity, and you know, I just jumped on it, and I'm very happy that I did that. I'm not sure that I would have if it wasn't for some of the great advice that I had from my mentors, sort of coming up. So I just think it's important to keep an open mind. It's okay to be scared, but sometimes you really need to just seize the opportunities that you have. They'll take you somewhere great.
Thanks, Joan. Appreciate that. Marc, you're up next.
So I'll just ditto everybody and just leave it at that. You know, everyone is, I completely agree with what everyone said. I think the two quick things that I would add is, you know, in terms of, which are kind of things that you can just do today, which you should just do today. You should, as everyone has said, you should know why. Why are you doing things? I think about that all the time because I have a, you know, almost 4-year-old who always asks why. But what you should do that he can't is to write it down. You know, write down now why, you know, you are doing things, and kind of, you know, explain to yourself, you know, where you want to go, because trust me, 10 years on, you may you may be better off than me, but my memory is no good anymore, and I cannot remember what happened 10 years ago. I can't even remember what happened this morning. So I would challenge you to write it down. There's so much value to kind of remembering and knowing your past self so that you know where you've been. The second thing I will say is also then to kind of echoing what Joan said, is to be flexible and to kind of, you know, look at your career as a set of building blocks that, you know, it's that kind of connects to that why. I had no idea starting off my career that I would end up where I am now and doing the kind of the work that I do now. I had no intent of doing it. But it all connected to my original why, which was to figure out ways to kind of support people in their everyday lives. Initially, I wanted to do that through education law and working on impact litigation in that field, but that didn't come to pass, and that it ended up being something that I wasn't interested in. But again, knowing what your why statement is, and writing that down and just figuring out how the blocks kind of come together to get to that point, I think that's, for me, that would be the advice that I would give. And knowing that all the blocks at the very beginning of your career may not, it may not be the perfect way to get to where you want to go, but know what skills you need and figure out ways that you can make those blocks fit into place in terms of building that road to where you want to go.
Thanks, Marc. Last but not least, Laurie, could you offer
Thank
some
you.
advice for us? Too?
Yes, a few things. Just to hit on what Maria said, I think also knowing what you don't like, that can be a huge thing to knock things off your list. I think for me, in the beginning, it was, do I want to go to court or not? And so I never saw myself as someone before a judge every day. So that knocked off a whole slew of things. But also to hit on what Joan said about being flexible, I think it's always a good reminder that to think that the path, your trajectory is not always straight, and to be open and flexible to, you know, maybe go to the side a little, but it might push you up later. And as an example, my first job was not an associate job. My title was client coordinator, and the managing partner allowed me to say attorney at law at my title. And essentially I was like a client liaison between all the patent clients and the attorneys. And I was just thankful for a way in to a firm. And within 9 months, I was promoted to an associate. So I think sometimes just getting in can offer some value. And as another story, one of my friends, she's probably about 2 or 3 years out, and she was very eager to get a job in privacy. And so I just saw on her LinkedIn a few weeks ago that she has a privacy job at Facebook, but not as an attorney, but as part of the privacy team. And so I thought, oh wow, that's great. She she's in a company on her way. So I think to always be open that there's other ways. And lastly, I think some other practical advice in terms of what you can do to get involved is that with the various bar associations, there's all kinds of events that are going on right now, and they have different committees you can join. For example, ABA has a law student speed networking event coming up that I think you can still sign up for. Also, FBANC, besides FBANC is the only affiliate that has an in-house counsel committee, which I'm one of the co-chairs, and we would love to have more law students who are interested in becoming in-house attorneys or learning more about what it's like. So there's ways there that you can get involved. And also one thing I do is I follow all kinds of bar associations across the country on social media, and just to see what they're doing. They might throw an event that I'm interested in and I can sign up for, especially now through Zoom. So, that could be a way to get more information and make more connections. So thank you.
Thank you all for that awesome advice. I'm gonna switch gears now to kind of more individualized questions, given that everyone here has such kind of diverse practices and diverse sectors of the legal profession. And I wanted to start with you, Joan. And this is a question about, it's specifically for students who are potentially interested in a career in big law. How do you suggest they approach their job search right now? I know that there's some people who are like incoming 2Ls will probably be doing OCI, which I believe was moved to January. So maybe like, how would you suggest, like, do you have any tips for OCI? And is OCI the only way to get a big law position? It seems like it's not. So maybe talk a little bit about, what it takes to get to your position.
So I would say right now, probably the best way, just given all the changes that are occurring sort of at the firms and the timing of hiring, I would sort of take stock of the places that you're considering and that you'd like to work at first, and see if you can track down the 3Ls that summered there, or even recent grads that are there now or who summered there, to get a sense of sort of the timing of that firm's hiring, and assuming you land an interview, you definitely then want to speak with people who summered there, because I think it's really important to show the interviewers that you're being resourceful and that you're communicating with people who have worked in their organization before, because it just shows your initiative and it'll make you stand out. And also the 3L or the recent grad might even put in a good word for you. So I think that's important to do sort of just right off the bat, is figure out where you want to go and why, and then find out the people who are at your law firm, at your law school, who have experience at those firms. And then if you can't find that, then recent graduates would also be, it's what I did, and everyone was very open to meeting with me and answering questions and providing some insight. And in terms of just general tips for OCI, I mean, it's a marathon and it's grueling. There's so many firms, and when you're preparing for it the weeks before, it seems pretty clear, like, okay, this firm does this, that firm does that. But then on the day of, when you're interviewing with 6 or 7 firms, they can all get muddled together. So I would have some sort of cheat sheet that just has some basic information, sort of like the key practice areas, because you don't want to mess that up. The key offices that the firm is sort of practicing in, and then just briefly something about each of the folks that you're interviewing with. At a bare minimum, you should have at least looked at their online bios. And to the extent that you could do more, I would dig in and find out sort of what their practice is. It might not even be clear based on their bio. So to the extent that you can do some digging on Westlaw or Pacer just to see some of the cases that they're involved in, that is just going to put you just above the pack. Because it's one thing to say that you're interested in the firm's practice area, but it's another thing to say, hey, I saw that you recently briefed a motion to dismiss in this case. I thought it was interesting, for these reasons. It just, that will put you above the pack. And that's something that someone did when I was conducting an interview, and I just thought this person is resourceful. I want her on my cases because she's the type of person that is going to just dig. And that's something that I think, that I would advise everyone to do.
Thank you so much. I think I would have benefited from that advice when I was doing OCI. I was like interviewing with I had one day where I was interviewing with 9 firms, and it was like super hard to keep everything on track. But yeah, this is great. I'm glad that we're getting this advice now, especially for our 2Ls. For this next question is for Vanessa, and so this is you own your own law firm, super successful lady. Can you talk a little bit about, well, maybe just family law first? You seem to have mentioned that you did a lot of informational interviews, and now that really put you in touch with a lot of your colleagues before you even started practicing it. But talk a little bit about, if anyone right now has an interest in family law or would like to join a smaller law firm, what do you say to those folks?
So family law is, I'm a huge fan of practicing family law, with the caveat that yes, from time to time I do get burnt out. Family law is interesting to me because it intersects many different other practices of law, from criminal law, immigration, real estate, bankruptcy, you name it. I have come across it in my practice. So I find it intellectually stimulating. It also is litigation. So if you want to become a family law attorney and not necessarily go to court, you might want to make a niche for yourself in mediation. But I realized early on in my career that I actually love going to court. So one of the things that I did while I was a judicial extern at the court was I watched a lot of the attorneys day in and day out when I was not drafting orders for the pro per litigants. And I made a list of, what attorneys I really liked seeing and what attorneys I thought, maybe not. And in family law, and like everything else, your reputation is all you have. And so if you want to work in a small law firm, usually you're going there because not only of the practice area, but because of the people that work there. So if you are interested in a particular small firm, like Joan said, do your research ahead of time, find out what the partners do there, find out what the attorneys do there, know a lot about them, because it's a big deal if they let you join their team, given that it's a small law firm. So, get your feet wet, watch lawyers, and now with courts being on Zoom, it's even that much easier to check into a family law department and kind of watch a proceeding. So that's what I would do. If you're interested in family law, obviously you can always call me. Happy to talk to you about it, but definitely do your homework if you're interested in a small law firm, and see if you know someone who works there, and that can get you an informational interview.
I wanted to ask a very quick follow-up, Vanessa. When
Sure.
you mentioned that you had all these informational interviews, how did you come across the people that you contacted, and what was it like trying to get that initial I want to speak with you?
Sure. It was like hustling. So I had a list of about 10 family law attorneys that I really, really wanted to emulate when I was going to become a more experienced family law attorney. So when I met with them, and they were all very happy and eager to meet with me, I asked them, who else should I be talking to? And they would give me names. And so from those 10 names grew 80 names. And I still can't believe that I had 80 informational interviews. It was like, 10, 20 a week sometimes. But it was definitely worth it. Like I said, I have no regrets about it. People are happy to connect you either by email or picking up the phone. I'm old school like that. I like picking up the phone. And even through FBANC, if someone on the board says, hey, this law student's interested in family law, they always connect me with that person. So that's how the 80 ended up becoming. It wasn't a goal at all, but it was what it was.
That's awesome. Thank you, Vanessa. All right, switching to Maria now. What would you say to students interested in working public interest? How can students prepare themselves, first of all, to be excellent candidates for public interest? And also, could you talk about the process for what it's like to actually get a public interest job after you graduate? Because that seems like I'm gonna be entering 3L year and I still am like, how? Like, because you hear a lot about things like the fellowships, right? But then you hear how like that's even more competitive than big law because there's only so many spots open, and there's like tons of people that apply for them. So what is that kind of gateway into public interest law? Could you talk a little bit about that for our students?
Sure. My advice for current or incoming, I'm not sure if the fall semester has started already, but for those who are about to enter or have entered their final year of law school, it might be too late to apply for fellowships. Be okay with the possibility that the very strong possibility, very real possibility that you may graduate without a job lined up, and explore opportunities called bridge fellowships. Sometimes it's called differently, through the schools that you're affiliated with. That's what I did. For those of you who are in your second year, consider fellowships, even though it is competitive, and you may not get it. I'm just being realistic in terms of probabilities. There's a chance you may get it, but there's also a very real chance that you won't. But that experience in itself, you would get a lot out of it. It's kind of, I feel like that's a public interest version, or a more narrow yet a more deep version of what Vanessa experienced with the informational interviews. So instead of talking to 80 people, going through working with a particular nonprofit who's willing to sponsor you, I think that's the first step, right? Finding a nonprofit who's willing to sponsor you, secure that sponsorship with them, and figuring out and planning what your project proposals are. So this will help solidify areas of interest for you, and that working relationship with that nonprofit will also give you insights into how are decisions being made at the nonprofit sector? What happens? Like, who makes this decision? Do I like this nonprofit in terms of their processes? Who holds the power here, right? So these are interesting things that, as a regular intern, like a summer intern, you may be able to get a glean of a little bit, but not the scholarship, the fellowship process allows you to gain a deeper insight into the nonprofit and the particular individuals with whom you may potentially be working with. So full disclosure, I went through the fellowship process. I found a nonprofit who wanted to, which sponsored me for the Scouting Fellowship. I made the first cut, didn't quite make it after the second interview. So I guess that segues into my other point, which is regardless of where you are, if you're an incoming 1L, incoming 2L, or incoming 3L, it's really important to develop our interviewing skills. And this message is mainly for people who are like me. If you're an introvert, I know, I feel you. I feel the agony that you might feel having to go through this process endless times. And it's necessary. There are no shortcuts. The best way to learn is by doing. The more we do, the more we get better. And imagine, so Vanessa, if I may go back to you a little bit, if that's okay. What were you like at the beginning of that informational, before you did all those 80 informational interviews? And what were your interviewing skills like towards the end? How has that process developed your skills? I hope I'm not breaking code, like process here.
All good.
Honestly, that's a great question, Maria. I can tell you right now that I took it very seriously. And so I would say at the very beginning, the first 10, I would say the first 3, I was a little too nervous, and I am extroverted. And one thing that you say is that you're introverted and how it is agonizing for you. I look forward to these things all the time. I cannot wait to meet the person I'm going to have an informational interview with. And just my experience with you, Maria, was so endearing. You were so sweet, and you were just yourself. And I really wanted to just hold you and help you with your career personally, professionally. And so for, even though you mentioned you're introverted, all you have to do is be you in whatever informational interview you're at. Because if you're not, people can see right through you. People know if you're being fake. But like with you, Maria, you're a very genuine, sincere person, and that's why you are where you are today. But to answer your question, absolutely. I treated it like a job. I also like getting to know people, if you know me well. And so, I'm really good at keeping in touch. So I mentioned I'm old school. I would send follow-up thank you notes. I would keep in touch. When I got my first job, you better believe that I let all of those 80 people know exactly where I was at. And from there, I was poached. So it definitely works.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. So that is a very strong testament to like, she's an introvert. I mean, but the first 3, she was still anxious. So if you're nervous, if you're anxious at informational interviews or at real ones, it's okay, it's normal. And there's no shortcuts. The more you do them, the more you get better. So it's really hard when you interview, when you talk to other people, even at the informational interview level or at an actual job interview. It's really hard because you're bearing yourself on some level, right? You have to make a choice about how much of yourself you show, how much of a facade you show. And it's a balancing act, right? We don't want to be too real that we're so comfortable, right? Because that's not appropriate either, right? But what does it mean that your core will shine through, that you'll be authentic, and yet you'll be tactful and professional, right? What would that look like for you? Uniquely you, and that's something that you have to figure out, and the best way to figure it out is do a bunch of them.
Thank you for that, Maria. I definitely relate to you, Vanessa, in that I love interviews. Like during OCI, I was like super pumped when I had those 9 interviews, and because I love meeting people. It's kind of my bread and butter. But let's move on to Laurie. You're next. And you're our in-house attorney, so I'm going to ask you about, so I think what a lot of students will hear about the in-house thing is that the typical route is that you'll go and you'll like work for a law firm, you'll be at that law firm for 3 to 5, maybe more years, and then you get poached by a client, and that's how you go in-house. But has this been your experience? It seems like maybe it was, but what advice would you share to our budding in-house attorneys who potentially would like to do similar work to you, maybe IP, and maybe thinking a little bit about like giving context to that, like in the world of COVID, where everything is like up in the air, what advice would you have for our students?
Yes, and I think what you described is still pretty common. When I started practicing, it was actually a lot longer. The typical in-house jump was probably around the 7th to 8th year, but now that's not the case, thankfully, for many of you here. I've seen openings as low as 3 to 5 years, as the guideline of what they're looking for. back then, it was pretty rare for a law student to go straight from law school, to a company. But I'm seeing a little bit more of that now. And I know 2 colleagues who have actually gone that route. And that was where they actually had a job as, an intern at that company or that tech company, and then they were brought on afterwards. So it's there. But I think, so the first thing, if you want to go in-house, you have to have, skills and a practice area that in-house departments are looking for, right? So, just as an example, litigation. I don't see that many openings that are just straight litigation that you do all day in-house. I mean, there are, those are mostly with the large companies, but I would say, you don't have some sort of transaction experience as well, doing contract reviews or, maybe, even like employment law, it's, I think, easier to go, in-house and find those positions. Let's see, I think hitting on Maria's point, interviewing, that's very important, a skill to always keep up. In-house interviews these days are, 5 to 6 rounds. You got to be ready for all, multiple rounds of interviewing. And so that's a skill you can always start practicing and practice often. And to be honest, I practice myself even now. I've been poking around and interviewing as well. And that's also, even though, for example, I may not be totally excited about an interview, I will take it anyway, because I think there's always something to learn about yourself or what you can do better, next time, for example. So.
Excellent. So it seems like interviewing skills are really important. So maybe a good idea for future event, mock interviewing. All right, on to Marc. So Marc, how exactly does one go from law student to government attorney? We are super curious. What was your path like, and what advice do you have for students interested in government work, especially in these COVID times?
So I hope a lot of students are interested in doing government work. If you ever have any questions about it, please reach out to me. And there are also a lot of other FBANC board members who are doing public sector work. So you have a full bench of folks who are kind of willing to talk to you and do those informational interviews that you're talking, that we've been talking about throughout. In terms of my path, I didn't jump into the government until about 6 years into my career. Much like in-house work, oftentimes people, don't jump into the government until later on. And I think that could be for good reason, so I'll give both sides of it right now. I think the one thing that, and there is an exception and I'll discuss it, but I think the one thing that government can do better at is that it can do a better job of training newer lawyers and really kind of mentoring and bringing up newer lawyers. For instance, when I look at my agency, we don't have a strong, which I hope to change, as hopefully the COVID times subside a bit, but we don't have a good, strong pipeline to the law schools to bring folks in, which I think is a real shame, because law students and newer lawyers bring a real energy to a workplace. You're not 10 years out like all of us who are all jaded. No, I'm joking. But you have the ideas, you have the drive. Law students are great in that way, and newer attorneys are great in that way. There is an exception to that, though. There are organizations and governmental organizations out there that have what are called honors programs, and which are specifically tailored programs to newer attorneys. And those programs do offer more support and kind of are more intentional about professional development in those early years of one's career, which are so crucial. I'm hoping to start that at the labor agency here in California, but we're not there yet. But places like my old employer, the US Department of Labor, the AG's office here in California, the Federal Department of Justice, various organizations out there, have these types of programs, which I think are both good for the workplace in the sense that they're being intentional and directing resources to bringing up newer attorneys, and that they're embracing newer attorneys, because again, I think that that is so key to the workplace. You need folks at every level, I think, to keep a workplace sharp and fresh. But it's also so important to the newer attorneys who will have that intentional support coming in. What I would say is, absent those two options out, that option out there, I do think that probably starting a career, in the private sector, getting your skills there, being, worked, work to the grindstone. I mean, Maria knows this. I used to have, everything just kind of runs back to Maria. As much of an introvert Maria is, she's been so supportive of all of us too. But when I was at the firm, I was just working long hours, and it was a tough slog to kind of get through those years at the firm, which I cry on Maria's shoulder about. But it was a great way to get trained. And I do think that, making that investment early on in your career, wherever it may be, is crucial to kind of your career success. So in that respect, if you're not going into a public sector workplace that has like an honors program or something intentional for your professional development early on in your career, I would definitely do it at the in the private sector somewhere to get those foundational skills so that you can have a strong foundation for your legal career. And one day we will have it at the California Labor Agency, hopefully next year.
If I can add to that, especially for in-house, but I agree with Mark as well. I'm a fan of putting in a few years at a law firm, and in the in-house context, why that's valuable is when you're in-house, it's very likely that you will manage outside counsel. And I think you can do that effectively, having been there at some point to know what to expect, what levels of service, or, knowing how long things typically take. That's always helpful. And also, one thing I forgot to mention is, we talked about, we have more time on our hands. So that's an opportunity, especially for those going in-house, but I think everyone in general, there are ways to expand your skill set. You can take a course or certification on Coursera, for example, or, Harvard or UC Extension, they have things there, if you want to learn more about coding or big data. I mean, there's so many opportunities to pick up extra knowledge. Also, if you want to go into the patent world, you don't have to be an attorney to take the patent bar. So as a law student, provided you have certain kinds of degrees or have taken classes, you can take the patent bar exam right now. Also, if you have interest in privacy, the CIPP, a bunch of people are doing that as well, if you have a passion for that. So there are many ways you can still add value to your resume at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Marc and Laurie. Marc, I had a follow-up question. And this is about so you mentioned there, a typical route is people doing the law firm thing first and then going into government. Is there a specific type of law firm work that is especially conducive to government work? Would most government agencies prefer that they were a plaintiff side attorney, let's say, or that they did litigation? Because there's such a wide range of private law firm work that you could be doing, and so for thinking about those students who are interested in government work down the line, is there something that they could do? Is there a practice area or a certain type of law firm that they should be looking at now if they're interested in transitioning later on?
That's an interesting question, and I'm gonna speak out of both sides of my mouth. The first answer is no. I think that what oftentimes when I've done hiring and when my colleagues have done hiring, they're really looking at skills. And this kind of gets back to what I was talking about, putting in those hours early on into your career, building that skill set, building that, finding those building blocks to have a firm foundation for your career. So I don't think that in large part, it doesn't matter kind of what you're doing, so long as you're getting those skills down, not just doing doc review, not just, kind of doing that kind of work, but, being able to say, hey, I argued something, I was able, as Laurie was saying, I kind of handled these kinds of projects, I managed a team, not managed in terms of the HR sense, but, I basically got projects done, and kind of making that type of, developing that kind of story for yourself. I will then say, yes, it does matter, kind of what work you specifically do, but in some respects, it depends on where you're going though. So for instance, for me, I work in enforcement agencies when it comes to, workers' rights and employee protections. So definitely one thing that does come up for more of these subject matter oriented government positions is this question, and this might be true of the PD's office as well, is, where is your interest coming from? What story are you going to tell to say, look, this is something that I'm really going to be interested in, because, this is not the most, lucrative job out there. And there are going to be long hours, in the public sector as well. So there's kind of a, there will be questions about, what's driving this person to do this? Are they just looking for, is it someone who's looking for a nice, cush public sector job, or is this going to be somebody who is really in it to win it and in it for the fight? I do think that that can be important in various organizations like, enforcement agencies, the PD's office. I know colleagues who've gone to the PD's office and those kinds of questions come up. So, I think on the one hand, no, it doesn't matter, but it does depend in terms of, what kind of government job you're looking at, because obviously government spans the full gamut.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. And actually, I just thought of another follow-up question, but this time for Vanessa. Can you describe what the workload is for a family law attorney? We're familiar with like the big law stereotype that's like, you work 80 hours per week and it's like you have no life and you work weekends and all that. But like, maybe if you can offer even insight into just generally small law firm life, could you speak a little bit about what your experience has been in terms of, the hours that you're working, especially running your own practice here? Maybe describe yours and also the associates maybe that work with you.
Maybe I won't describe mine. I might scare people away. When you own your own law firm, you're working all the time. There's no Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. But you also have the flexibility and the ability to, I can not work for a week if I want to, or I can work from Mexico if I want to. So I would say starting out, family law attorneys who are associates, they're expected to bill anywhere between maybe 1,000 to 1,400 hours a year, and that's not necessarily high considering what the big law firms are requesting. But we have, a lot of clients, and so it might be easier to. This is what I'm hearing from my colleagues. You might work on one client a day at a big law firm. In my office, we have, you could be touching, 20 cases a day, and you've got to multitask and switch tasks and switch clients and know what to do for each particular client at any given time. So I would say you have to learn how to juggle. I would say it's just as intense. You're probably working more than 40 hours a week. You're probably working some weekends, and it's a steep learning curve. So in between billing, you're also trying to learn, right? There's so many facets of family law and so many subcategories that you eventually have to, know and master. So it's definitely intense. I'm not going to lie, but it's very rewarding.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, I have one question that might turn into more. So the state of the economy is kind of like weird right now. We're like, maybe it's going to be a recession, but who knows? It seems like the job losses are like steadily being gained back again. All this to say, there seems to be so much uncertainty right now with like what's going on with the job market, especially the legal job market. But a piece of advice that stuck out to me, like from the last recession, is like just network, and I think I'm getting that too here. And not network in the sense of like the transactional kind that's like, oh, give me your business card and I'll send you an email and that'll be it. It's really like about that like relationship building. And for those of us who are interested in doing a lot more of that, we may have to find more creative ways to do so in these COVID times, as they say. So maybe if you all could speak on like your experience with like now that you're kind of this far off into your career, like what has it been like trying to network, whether that's with younger attorneys, not to say you're not young, or like, you know, like newly minted attorneys, or with, you know, more experienced attorneys. I know that Zoom is a very popular medium, but what advice would you have for our budding attorneys who are interested in meeting more people, but maybe looking to, you know, like expand their networks in these digital times? And I guess I could start with Joan. We haven't heard from you in a bit.
Sure. So I mean, I would just reach out to, starting with FBANC folks that you want to get to know, and just sort of reach out and see sort of what response you get back. And then from there, you know, go to your career development office, take a look at some of the recent grads or long-term grads and reach out there. I mean, the worst, it's always really uncomfortable and difficult to reach out to someone that you don't know, but the worst that can really happen is they don't answer and you're really no worse off. You're really no worse off. And like Maria said, I'm similar to Maria in the sense that I'm introverted. I don't, you know, when I step into a room at a networking event, it's not something that excites me. I'm there because, you know, my friends are there, or because I know that, you know, this is something that is good for me, and it's something that, you know, I need to do to get better at. So I think, you know, my advice really, at least during these times, is probably for someone who's introverted, it's probably even better that it's, you know, during a pandemic, because then you can just pick up the phone and talk on the phone, and you don't really have to meet in person. You know, if you don't want to do, assuming you don't want to do Zoom. But I think the first step is really to send an email, go on LinkedIn and send someone a message and just start from there. Trust me, someone will respond to you, I promise. If not, you can contact me.
Thanks for the offer, Joan. Some of our students might take you up on that, including me. Let's see, Maria, would you like to chime in?
Sure. So as I have noted earlier, networking is not, it's my area of growth. And what I've found is that there are a number of different ways that work for me. One is that, well, two different points. One is I realized that my best way of networking, my most effective way of networking, is by working and having others see it. And so I guess I'm saying this to highlight that when we think of networking, we don't think of like internships as networking, or, you know, shadowing someone for a day. Shadowing won't work right now, probably. But I want to challenge that notion of networking as this narrow thing where you talk to someone, you ask them questions, and maybe pretend to be interested in what they're saying, and try to come up with, like, you know, intelligent ways to respond. But I want to broaden that and think about, like, what areas, what are you interested in? What's your question? What's your goal for the networking? Start with the what or the why, right? Because if you want to know, for example, if you're interested in a public sector, in a particular nonprofit, and you want to know what the culture of that nonprofit is, or an entity or a firm, then that's a very different conversation that what are the skills that I need in order to pursue this particular career path? Those are two very different questions. And the first one requires a relationship with the person you're already communicating with. Whereas the second one, you may get that information from someone you're reaching out to for the first time, right? So have a better sense of your whys. Why are you contacting? What's your goal? And figuring out who are the key players to connect with. So for me, Marc is a key player, Vanessa is a key player, and I'm mentioning it because so as I may have mentioned earlier, I burned out after working at a nonprofit for 5 years. And when I was exploring getting back into legal work, representation work in particular, I reached out to Marc, I reached out to Vanessa, and I had rather agonizing conversations with them because I had to be more honest. And these are relationships that I've had for 6-7 years. And so the type of connection, the type of communication, the type of questions and the type of answers you will get depend in part of the quality of the relationship you already have. And so I want to highlight, take the time to think about and plan what your questions are, what do you want to know more about, and where can you get it from?
Thank you. Vanessa, let's hear from you.
I just want to say, I love you, Maria. You are so authentic. So I just want to say, I echo everything that she says. In terms of networking, if your purpose of networking is because you want to get a job, and I've had lots of informational interviews with, aspiring family law attorneys. I would say you've got to be memorable. You've got to be able to articulate to me that you're passionate about family law. You're not just, you heard it sounds kind of fun and you want to try it out. And then if you are again looking for a job and trying to do so through an informational interview, you really have to sell yourself. And I know that makes a lot of you uncomfortable because it's not we're not programmed to like sell ourselves and our skills, but I think it's important. You invested in yourself by going to law school, by taking advantage of all these incredible opportunities during law school. You've got to be able to articulate what makes you different from all the other people who might be vying for the same job that you are, and make it memorable. Also be yourself. So I know that's a lot, but in terms of looking for a job, I definitely think it's important that you stick out and so have your 30-second elevator speech ready to go. Practice, practice, practice. If you are doing an informational interview because you want to get to know someone, you think they would be a good mentor to you. Maybe someone at FBANC said, oh, you should meet this person, and you just want to get to know that person. Just be authentic, be yourself, and cultivate the relationship. That is, in my opinion, really important. Sometimes it's more important than the first meeting, it's your follow-up. So, and if you do follow up, because that speaks to character for me. So definitely take it seriously, know your purpose, like Maria said, relax, but definitely put yourself out there. It's important.
Thanks, Vanessa. Laurie.
Yes, I think an easy way to network is to, and I touched on this earlier, is to get involved. Especially if you have the bandwidth to do that. So, as an example, so I serve on 3 in-house committees: FBANC, ABA, as well as NFALA. And with each of those, I help plan events. And in that process, I meet people because I'm working with them to plan events, and then we host an event. And then there's more people that I meet that come to the events. And so it's an easy way to get plugged in and meet people from not only locally, but nationwide, and learn about their companies. So I think that's a practical thing that you can do is to join and help plan. If that's not up your alley, I still also stress the importance of networking. And I'm goal driven. And so I meet with someone new, whether it's someone who's reached out to me or someone more senior than me, at least once a week. And through this pandemic, so I've constantly been doing that. But like Vanessa, I enjoy doing that. So it doesn't feel like work to me. But as many folks have commented here, being authentic is real important, and people will see through it, even through Zoom. They may not feel that energy, but the attitude that you bring forth and that energy through the screen, I think people still feel that, and people remember how you make them feel. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Laurie. That makes a lot of sense, and I think that's really great advice, especially for our 1Ls. Marc, last but not least. I love your children.
I do too. Although I'm kind of worried that she's gonna keel, not keel over, but like fall over somewhere. I mean, I echoing Laurie and Maria, I think finding those opportunities to have authentic, opportunities to kind of just work with other people and get to know them that way that's the way it's been for me. So for me, Maria has disagreed for the entire term of our friendship, but I have, I'm not an extrovert. She says I am, but I really, I think I do genuinely like people, but it's hard for me to just walk into a room and just hang out with folks. I am the awkward person who tells the joke that makes no sense whatsoever and then tries to cover it up. I think the best way to kind of get around that is to find those opportunities where you have to interact with people. And, in your mind, the social anxiety that comes with quote unquote networking kind of falls away because you have this coping mechanism of, I need to interact with so-and-so because we're working together. I was an RA in college, and I did it in part because it gave me a reason to kind of meet people. It gave me an excuse. So I had kids because it gives me an opportunity to talk to somebody, otherwise, no, I'm joking about that too. But I do really echo, the one thing I would kind of promote here too, because I was also a former mentorship chair for FBANC, is look at programs like FBANC's mentorship program so that you can say to yourself, hey, I'm here because I signed up for this program. They're providing me with this opportunity, and it's just something that, Will told me to go do, because he put it on the calendar, and now I have to go meet with these people. Because I think that at least for me, took away the social anxiety that I had and continue to have in terms of just meeting people cold and kind of doing things that way, even though Maria thinks that I'm an extrovert.
To add on that, I think Marc makes a really good point, because if, for example, you join a certain committee, and FBANC has many committees that you could join, and let's say you do help with an event or you offer some assistance with something, you're putting in some work, and people remember that, and they're working with you, and so they know that you're reliable and you have a nice personality and you're a good person. So that can go a long way too. And if there's an opportunity that come across their desk, they could think of you, or if it comes to a time where they might have to recommend you or can recommend you, they've seen some of the work that you've put in, and that goes a long way. And hopefully you're not doing it just you want to do it, you like it, and you enjoy it. And again, that comes through with your authenticity and and being real and honest, and people will see that.
Thank you, Marc and Laurie. So I want to give some time for Q&A. I haven't received anything in the Q&A or the chat, or is there anything in the chat? No. But if people want to post any questions right now, that would be great. But I do actually want to say something really quick about like all the opportunities that there are in FBANC to get involved as a law student. There's so many. You can like get a mentor and interact with FBANC that way. And like planning this like Komunidad, like it involved a lot of law students. And I was part of that last year, peripherally part of it this year, because I'm obviously moderating this panel. And yeah, like Laurie said, like there's FBANC has so many different committees, and I didn't even know that you could join them as a law student, but I guess you can. So and just wanted to say too that like if like any job you can think of like within the legal profession, like there's probably somebody like either is in FBANC or someone in FBANC knows somebody who's working that job. And so this is kind of like the one-stop shop for for like creating that network, that supportive network that you can really leverage when it's you know, as you're seeking employment or just generally support. I have a question from Vanna Lee. She says, what is the best way to contact each of the panelists, LinkedIn or email? What do you guys think? Like, I think we should share people's emails, and maybe if they have LinkedIn pages, then their LinkedIn also in an email to all the participants. I don't know. Maybe Maribeth, you can say something about that. Or not. Any of the panelists?
I can go first. So if you'd like to contact me, email is best. I've put my email address on the chat box. I can also say it. It's msegarra@jubileelegal.org. Just to be completely honest, I don't check my LinkedIn that often, so that's not a good way for you to contact me.
Yeah, I think email would be best for just general communication with people. But yeah, it looks like our panelists are putting their emails in the chat. But it's not, we don't just have these, is it 5 of you? Yeah, 5 wonderful people. FBANC is a massive network of attorneys spanning all different kinds of practice areas, with you know, varying levels of like years out of law school. So please, like, this is my one takeaway for like the law students on this call is leverage that, get to know these wonderful, amazing individuals, because that's just how you can like get a step ahead, like as a law student entering the profession. Are there any other questions? Because if not, then I will ask one very quick thing of each of the panelists. What is the one takeaway that you would like to impart on our law students on this call? And I'll start with, let's start with Laurie, because you went last time.
Sure. So I think just to highlight it again, to have, as Joan had mentioned, to have an open mind and be flexible to the way to your pathway and that trajectory and opportunities that may have come across your way. But I think also something that I always remind myself is attitude and gratitude every day, to be thankful of the blessings that I have, but also that the attitude, you know, your attitude can make a difference of you having a really good day or a bad day, and you know, waking up with a good attitude and seeing the good things that come across your way. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. Appreciate that. Joan, why don't you go next?
I'll echo what Laurie said, and I think really just keep an open mind, stay positive, and really do recognize that it is a privilege that we have this education. So, you know, stay positive.
Marc, want to go next?
Sure. I would say just write yourself a note. Write yourself a note today about why you're doing this. All of us should, and I will too. I will too. Okay. So that you can remember this point in time, because memories do fade, or you know, you end up filling in something else later on as to what you thought now. And it's so good to remember where you're coming from. So write something down.
Maria?
Start by believing you are enough. And being enough doesn't mean we're perfect. Being enough doesn't mean we are where we want to be. But being enough means we feel like we deserve to occupy the place that we're in. And I feel like for some of us, there's this feeling that maybe I don't belong here, or maybe I'm pretending I don't have what it takes really, but I'm just faking it. And faking might be a good coping mechanism in the here and now. But when we're put through the interview process, it's hard to fake it because the interviewers will notice. And so I think finding that place within you where you believe you're enough goes a long way. And it's not something that I did or I've discovered or I've done until after law school, and I wish I could go back in time. But I also have to, be kind to myself and tell myself it's okay. I did the best I could then, and I'm aiming for my better self in 2020.
Yes, thank you, Maria. And finally, but not least, Vanessa?
Imposter syndrome is real. Mindset is key. I mean, take every opportunity and see it as a place you can grow from. So every no is going to bring you closer to a yes, and remember that. So always check what your little voice in your head is telling you, and be kind to yourself. Mindset's key, just like what Joan and Laurie said, attitude and gratitude.
I love it. Thank you so much. And just to conclude, Maribeth, if you'd like to take yourself off mute, or is it Mari? Is it Mari? Just kidding. It's Mari. Mari's going to give a very quick closing remarks. Thank you, Mari.
Thank you, Idrian. Thank you to our esteemed panelists for spending your Sunday with us. To the FBANC board, to Ruthie Ashley, to Judge Reyes, some of the FBANC members who joined the breakout sessions, including, I think I saw Christine start there, to the Bay Area Pals Coalition. We couldn't do this without you. Of course, to Laurie, Vanessa, Marc, Joan, and Maria, to our mentorship directors, Will and Maribeth, for coordinating virtual Komunidad today. I'm in my 8th year of practice, and yet I learned so much from today, especially from this panel, how to interview, how, remaining authentic to myself, how to be a better mentee, how to cultivate relationships, and that I am enough. For those of you who may not know, FBANC's theme this year is Pamana, or Legacy, in celebration of FBANC's 40th year. So our programming this year is focused on commemorating FBANC's 4-decade-long commitment to diversifying the legal profession and also to the service of the Filipinx American community. But we're also focusing on looking towards investing into the future of FBANC. And FBANC's legacy is really this community, and it's really you, the next generation of Filipinx American attorneys. So if we didn't emphasize it enough today, please reach out to me, to Maribeth, to Will, to the FBANC board, to all of the panelists and speakers today. If you need an introduction to someone you aspire to be, if you need help with your law school application, if you want a mentor, we are here for you. We're also seeking feedback from you about how FBANC can better serve you. So if you're not a member of FBANC yet, please sign up during this membership drive. It's only $4 to become a FBANC member for law students until the end of the month. I mean, that's less than a cup of coffee, you guys. We just need you to invest. I need you to make that $4 commitment to be part of this family, right? So if this is your first FBANC event, welcome to the family. We hope this conference was helpful to you, and we look forward to seeing you at future events, whether it's virtual or hopefully in person soon enough. Have a good rest of your Sunday afternoon. Lastly, I know it's been a long day, but make sure to join the Bay Area Pals Coalition for a happy hour at 3:30, so you get a 29-minute break to connect with other aspiring law students and your fellow law students. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.